Let's remain in this database area while we discuss about another Laravel component, models. We talk about the V of the MVC pattern, now let's talk about M. Models in Laravel are represented by the Eloquent class. Eloquent is an object relational mapper, a component that maps the database data into actual objects, as we'll see shortly. Right now in our database we have a table called books with no records. Let's see how we can add some records to it by using the Eloquent class. First, I'm going to navigate to my models folder of my app and will create a new file inside this folder, a file called book.php. It's important to note that when we declare a model, we give its name as a singular entity or record of the table that will store that type of data, the books table in our case. So, our model will be called book, while our database table that this model will represent will be called books. In other words, our model will represent an actual record of our books table. Let's start writing our model. We start with the opening PHP tag, as this is an PHP file. Then we declare our class. We start with a keyword class, followed by class name, which is book, again singular, and our class is going to extend the Eloquent class. We then put the curly braces and that's about it. That's our model declaration. It can be written in a single line of code. So, we declare the new class which extends the Laravel's Eloquent class. By extending this class, our class inherits all the public and protected method that Eloquent has. We can override some of these methods in case we need to, as we'll see later. Now that our model is defined, let's see it in action. I'm going to delete these lines of code from the routes.php file and will also comment the line that returns the view. I'll then start by creating a new book variable. The variable will hold an instance of our model called book. So I will write the line book equals new book. Now that we have our book object, we can assign properties to it. But what are these properties? These are nothing else than our database columns. You see now how the Eloquent works. It maps our database columns into object properties. Let's assign a value to the writer property of the book object. We do that by using our book variable, and to the writer property we assign a value, let's say Mark Twain. Let's do the same with the title. Let's assign that to The Adventure of Tom Sawyer. Next we set the description. Then the published date, which will assign it to the current date, and we end by saving the book. By using the save function to save our book object, we actually insert a new record in the database, one that will have the columns that we specified as properties for our object. To verify that the object has been saved, we return its newly created ID, which in our case will be 1, as this is the first record of the table. I will save the file and let's give it a try. I'm going to reload the main Laravel's page, the one that contains our code, and as expected, the number 1 is returned as the ID of the book object. It means that our book has been saved successfully. Let's verify that in our database. I will browse the books table and indeed, one record can be found. It has the ID of 1 and the other fields are having the values that we specified when creating our object. As you can see, the created at and updated add fields have been also populated, containing the actual date that we inserted the object. Back to our editor, let's comment these lines and let's say that we want to update one property of our object. Now that we have already one record in the database, let's grab it and play with its properties. In order to do that, we can use the find method of the model by specifying the ID of the record that we want to retrieve. In our case, this will be 1, as we only have one record available with the ID of 1. Now that we have a reference to our book, let's change its in-store value from 0 to 1 or from false to true. I'll say book in-store equals true. We then save the record by using the save function, and finally let's return its updated value, or the value of the in-store property. I'll save the file and will refresh the browser. Oops, looks like something went wrong. This is an error returned by Laravel framework. We'll see later how we can get more information about these errors, but for now on, let's see what's wrong with my code. Back to the editor, and indeed, the value assigned to the in-store property is true, while it has to be 1 or 0 as the database column is represented by a tiny int value. So I changed this to 1 and let's give it another try. By refreshing the page, we can see now that the return value is 1, the same as the one we specified for that property. Let's double check with our database. As we can see, the in-store column has been updated from 0 to 1. Let's now delete the record from the database. Back to our code editor, we'll replace the two lines with a single one, which is calling the delete method. I will also uncomment the viewMakeReturn statement. Let's refresh the browser page and no error, looking good. Back to phpMyAdmin to see if the record has been actually deleted. Right now the record is still present, but if I click on browse, we can see that the record is gone. So, to summarize, in this lesson we learn about Laravel's models represented by the Eloquent class. We saw how simple it is to actually implement the model and how intuitive we can use objects to add, modify or delete database records.